You're listening to CineMemphis, a movie podcast from the heart of Memphis, Tennessee, but made for film fans everywhere. Whether you're into cult classics, modern blockbusters, deep cut trivia, or just love hearing people geek out about great cinema, you're in the right place. I'm Zach, film collector, casual gamer, walking, talking IMDb, and your host. Each episode will break down a film, share some behind-the-scenes gems, and maybe even get a little weird with it. Let's roll them.
A lot of people saying a lot of things.
There are some who'd make me out to be the villain of this here story.
Of course, you got to listen to the people that you love.
The way you sing, it's God-given, so there can't be nothing wrong with it.
But in the end, you got to listen to yourself.
I think if you dream it, you'll do it.
Never met anyone like you.
I hope not.
I am the man who gave the world Elvis Presley. Without me, there would be no Elvis Presley.
What did you say?
The special was my idea.
I don't give a damn what the Colonel thinks.
Wanna bet? Who are you? We are the same, you and I. We are two odd-lonely children reaching for eternity.
This ain't no nostalgia show. We're going to do something different.
Well, what about you, Mr. Presley? Are you ready to fly?
Yes, sir. I'm ready. Ready to fly.
When you're born in Memphis, Tennessee, you don't just learn about Elvis Presley, you absorb him. His shadow stretches across the city. Plenty of famous people come from somewhere, but few can honestly say they changed the world. Elvis did. Actor, musician, cultural lightning rod, the king of rock and roll didn't just live the American dream, he helped redefine it. His music cracked open American pop culture and never really left. And as someone born and raised here, I know the legend backwards and forwards. I've toured Graceland a few times, stood in Meditation Garden, watched most of his movies, spun the records. I've even tried the peanut butter and banana sandwich. I didn't expect to be surprised by a new take on Elvis, and yet, somehow, Baz Luhrmann managed to turn his life into something that feels less like a standard biopic and more like an American opera.
I think I wanted to do something that was relevant for now. And now is a lot about, we're in a struggle between the big sell and the artist and the spirit. His story is unbelievable. His humanity has got lost, I think.
Luhrmann, best known for reinventing Romeo and Juliet, electrifying the musical with Moulin Rouge, and restaging The Great Gatsby in full Technicolor excess, had been circling an Elvis project for years. For all of Elvis's fame, there had never been a definitive feature film biography. There were television adaptations, of course, John Carpenter's 1979 TV movie starring Kurt Russell, and a 2005 miniseries that earned Jonathan Rhys-Meyers a Golden Globe, but nothing that fully mythologized the king for the big screen. What finally pushed Luhrmann's version to the starting line wasn't nostalgia, it was the American political climate.
A tragedy. But it has nothing to do with us.
It has everything to do with us.
I just do not think we should be making speeches about politics and religion.
Dr. King was shot 8 miles from Graceland while I was out here singing to turtles.
In a moment when America had elevated a master of spectacle and self-invention to the presidency, Luhrmann began to see Elvis's story differently. Not as a simple tale of talent meeting destiny, but as a case study in promotion, power, and myth-making. At the center of it all was Colonel Tom Parker, a carnival huckster who understood that controlling the narrative was just as important as controlling the man. With a way to tell the king's story in mind, Luhrmann flew from his home in Australia to right here in Memphis, Tennessee, to take up residence in the king's castle, Graceland.
Any telling of anyone's life is only somebody's telling. It's only somebody's point of view. And so Parker tells it from his point of view. I think it's a very American reality is that it's called show business, and that Elvis was an incredible artist, no matter which way you look at it. But there's also the business side of it.
For roughly 18 months, Luhrmann didn't just visit Memphis, he lived it. He and his team set up an office on the grounds of Graceland itself, reportedly in the barn behind the mansion, and spent that time poring over archival material while physically following Elvis's story from his birth in a shotgun shack in Tupelo through his rise to global fame. There he combed through business records, home movies, and previously unseen footage, and listened to people who had known Presley in life. A lot of Luhrmann's research was displayed for posterity during Graceland's Elvis movie exhibition after the film's release. It wasn't about recreating the myth everyone already knew. It was about figuring out how it was built in the first place.
I hate Elvis.
Yes, I hate Elvis. In my way of thinking, I love Elvis. That's an easy sell. Those who hate your son will do so whether we profit from it or not. After all, what is hate worth if it's free?
Because Luhrmann chose to frame the story through Colonel Parker's eyes, he needed someone with enormous presence to anchor it. And he cast Academy Award winner Tom Hanks. Hanks already had unexpected ties to Elvis and Memphis. In Forrest Gump, the young Forrest famously inspires Elvis's signature hip-swiveling dance. And in Castaway, directed by Academy Award-winning Gump filmmaker Robert Zemeckis, Hanks plays a Memphis native who gifts a child an Elvis CD. The latter was even partially filmed here in Memphis. Here's a clip of Mr. Hanks being interviewed for the film's Graceland premiere.
Colonel Tom Parker was a carny, pure and simple. He was a genius, and he understood that Elvis was such a one-of-a-kind artist that comes along once every century, certainly when it comes down to, popular culture. Now, did Elvis suffer from the fact that he had a promoter as opposed to an artistic manager? I think so. I don't think you can fault the Colonel for not representing a one-of-a-kind artist for those 12 years in a way that didn't live up to the true promise of Elvis Presley.
The most daunting casting decision, of course, was Elvis himself. You don't just need someone who can sing and act. You need someone who can embody one of the most famous, most imitated figures in American history. Then, unexpectedly, Luhrmann received a phone call from Academy Award winner Denzel Washington. Washington was calling to vouch for a young co-star of his in Broadway's The Iceman Cometh, Austin Butler. Butler's resume stretched from Nickelodeon sitcoms like Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide and Zoe 101, to Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he played one of the Manson family members. He had sent Luhrmann an audition tape of himself at the piano, singing Unchained Melody, a song he chose because it had been a favorite of his late mother. That vulnerability, that ache, was what Luhrmann heard. And just like that, he had found his Elvis.
So many people have an idea of Elvis, or they revere him as a godlike figure or as a Halloween costume, or there's all this noise. And the fascinating thing that I was most drawn to was, who is he when nobody's looking?
Despite all that time spent in Memphis, production would ultimately relocate halfway across the world. Luhrmann chose to film primarily in his home country of Australia, a decision driven by practicality as much as patriotism. Australia offered significant tax incentives, world-class crews, and soundstage facilities capable of recreating everything from Beale Street to the Las Vegas International Hotel. And as romantic as it sounds to shut down Memphis for a period piece, you can't exactly roll the city back to 1956 without enormous cost and disruption. So Memphis was studied here and rebuilt there. Then, just as production was gearing up in early 2020, the world stopped. COVID-19 swept across the globe, and the film's momentum came to a screeching halt when Tom Hanks and his wife Rita Wilson tested positive while in Australia. Overnight, one of the first major Hollywood productions to feel the impact of the pandemic was Elvis. Sets went dark. Cast and crew quarantined. And for a moment, it seemed possible that this operatic Elvis story might collapse before it ever began.
Now, this entire jamboree is an embarrassment. You have embarrassed the sponsors, you have embarrassed yourself, you have embarrassed me.
For a film already built on spectacle and precision, the uncertainty was brutal. At one point, Hanks considered whether the project would even survive, whether it made sense to continue at all in a world that suddenly felt unrecognizable. But instead of walking away, he leaned in. Isolated during quarantine, Hanks began writing typed letters to Austin Butler, in character as Colonel Tom Parker. Hanks, famously obsessed with typewriters, would compose these notes as the Colonel, boastful, manipulative, encouraging, needling. For Butler, who was already deep in voice training and physical transformation, those letters weren't gimmicks. They helped sustain the dynamic of control and tension that would define the film. And here's the twist no one could have predicted. The delay may have saved the movie. Warner Brothers, in 2021, made the controversial decision to release its entire slate simultaneously in theaters and on HBO Max, a move that deeply upset filmmakers across the industry. Its most devastating result being Christopher Nolan defiantly leaving Warner Brothers for Universal Pictures to make eventual Best Picture winner Oppenheimer. But because Elvis had been pushed by the pandemic, it missed that window. Instead, it received a full theatrical rollout in 2022, exactly the kind of big screen, high volume spectacle Luhrmann's maximalist style demands. After months of silence, quarantine, and uncertainty, the story that began in Memphis was finally ready to be told, not as nostalgia, but as an odyssey.
In a room this size, you could give them the greatest show on earth. Nothing less than Elvis Presley.
The film opens in the twilight of Colonel Tom Parker's life, feverish and defensive, determined to tell his side of the story. A former carnival promoter, Parker recognizes Elvis Presley not as a cultural revolution, but as the greatest attraction he has ever seen. A handsome young white man channeling the black music of Beale Street with a rawness that sends young female audience members into hysteria. Where others see a gifted guitar picker who loves his mama and daddy, Parker sees destiny and dollar signs. Their partnership launches them into meteoric fame, but what begins as promotion slowly turns into control. As public outrage mounts and the machine tightens, the Army, the Hollywood years, the '68 comeback, the Vegas spectacle, Parker works to package and contain his star, even as Elvis strains against the leash. Beneath it all lies a secret the Colonel will do anything to protect, and a king who refuses to be ruled.
I am a promoter. That is what I do.
And I'm Elvis Presley. That's what I do.
From the outset, Elvis presents itself not as a traditional biography, but as something closer to a confession, or perhaps a closing argument. Parker addresses the audience like a defense attorney before an unseen jury, insisting that he didn't exploit the king of rock and roll, but elevated him. That framing changes the experience entirely. We aren't watching Elvis's life unfold neutrally. We're seeing it filtered through the man who claims to have created him.
I made Elvis Presley. Nothing all those muckrakers said in their books was true. Me and Elvis, we was partners. It was Elvis the Showman and the Colonel the Snowman.
By positioning Parker as narrator, self-justifying, theatrical, unreliable, Luhrmann transforms a familiar rise and fall music biopic into a story about authorship, control, and the machinery behind the myth.
Those know-it-all hippies had brainwashed Elvis, acting like he was one of them radicals, throwing his career away to sing spirituals with a bunch of long hairs.
If you're expecting a restrained, cradle-to-grave biography, you're in the wrong theater. This isn't Walk the Line, even if they were polite enough to film in Memphis.
What did you say?
Luhrmann approaches Elvis as an operatic roller coaster, rapid, neon-lit, breathless. The editing hurtles forward in bursts of split screens and smash cuts. Decades collapse into seconds.
Okay, now let's segue straight into the whorehouse dances. Go.
Whorehouse? No.
Music doesn't stay in its proper historical lane. It bleeds, remixes, collides. The Beale Street sequence pulses like a fever dream, collapsing gospel, blues, and rock into a single ignition point. Even Elvis's childhood fascination with Captain Marvel Jr. is rendered in comic book flourishes, myth literally drawn onto the screen.
Captain Marvel Jr., my favorite comic book hero.
The '68 comeback special crackles with kinetic urgency, all black leather and sweat and defiance. And Las Vegas becomes something grotesque, glittering, overwhelming, a gilded cage built of light. Luhrmann isn't recreating history, he's staging sensation. The film doesn't ask you to observe Elvis, it asks you to feel what it was like when he hit like a lightning bolt.
I'm gonna show you what the real Elvis is like tonight!
At its core, Elvis becomes a tug of war between two performances. Taking on one of the most recognizable and most impersonated figures in American history would be daunting for any actor, but Austin Butler meets the challenge head on. His portrayal earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, and it's easy to see why. Butler doesn't simply mimic Elvis, he inhabits him.
The Reverend once told me, when things are too dangerous to say, sing.
The voice that he just couldn't shake for months after filming, the inimitable posture, the smoldering good looks, the sudden flashes of temper. There are moments where you could play his delivery alongside archival recordings and struggle to tell them apart. But more importantly, he captures the vulnerability beneath the swagger, the loneliness, the pressure, the ache. Tom Hanks moves in the opposite direction. His Colonel Parker is theatrical, self-justifying, outsized. A carnival barker serving as our tour guide through Elvis's world.
It was life on the road, just like the old days.
Parker relishes being the unreliable narrator, framing his choices as necessity rather than exploitation. The performance has divided audiences, called everything from hammy to excessive, but that excess feels deliberate. Hanks isn't trying to disappear into Parker, he's leaning into the artifice, embodying the very showmanship the film is critiquing. Where Butler reveals the man, Hanks defends the myth. The tension between them doesn't just drive the story, it defines it.
Oh, you blood-sucking old vampire. You bled me dry and you still want more?
I'm not an uncaring man, Mr. Presley.
Don't you, Mr. Presley, me, you toad.
The soundtrack is another bold swing. Yes, the film is wall-to-wall with Elvis. Some of it archival, some of it performed by Austin Butler so seamlessly it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. But Luhrmann doesn't stop there. He deliberately fractures time. Modern artists like Eminem, CeeLo Green, Diplo, Casey Musgraves, Tame Impala, Stevie Nicks, Chris Isaak, and Jack White are woven into the sonic fabric, not as novelty, but as lineage. Elvis influenced generations, and the film lets these generations answer back. Doja Cat's Vegas, which reimagines Hound Dog through hip-hop swagger, is the clearest example. Elvis's rhythm reborn in a different cultural moment. There are even flashes of pop anachronism, Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, that feel almost mischievous. Purists may bristle, but the point isn't historical purity. It's momentum. Luhrmann treats Elvis's catalog the way Elvis treated the blues, as something alive, remixable, explosive. And crucially, the modern flourishes never overwhelm the source. The king still gets his spotlight. The film even reinvigorates standards like Burning Love, pushing them faster and harder than ever before.
Tremendous triumph.
Elvis the Man was America's first true rock star, a cultural detonation that changed music, fame, and the business of both forever. Elvis the film understands that you can't tell that story quietly. It doesn't try to sand down the rough edges or fit him neatly into a prestige biopic template. It's excessive, messy, electric, light and dark colliding within the same spotlight. Austin Butler anchors it with a performance that captures not just the voice and the swagger, but the cost of carrying the crown. Tom Hanks embodies the machinery that built and confined the legend. The result isn't a museum exhibit, it's a spectacle about spectacle. A film that treats Elvis not as a relic, but as an ongoing force in American culture. Here in Memphis, Elvis still feels larger than life. And maybe that's the point. Legends aren't meant to shrink with time. They're meant to glow brighter, especially when someone knows how to light them. Maybe that's the real trick at the heart of Elvis. Not whether Colonel Parker created the king, but whether America did. And whether we ever stop trying to do it again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to CineMemphis, hosted by Zach Parks. Thanks for joining us, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, this has been CineMemphis.